What happened after Dolly Parton died was not simply the end of a remarkable career. Almost immediately, attention turned toward everything she had built, everything she had protected, and everything that remained behind her. Because Dolly Parton did not leave the world with only songs and memories. She left behind decades of work, carefully developed businesses, creative projects, and a life that had quietly grown far larger than the stage ever revealed. And now, as the first details surrounding her final chapter emerge, a bigger question is beginning to take shape. What exactly did Dolly Parton leave behind? What had she accumulated during more than 6 decades in the public eye? What did she keep private? What was already prepared to continue without her? And when the pieces of her professional and personal world are finally examined together, what might they reveal about the woman behind the rhinestones, the jokes, and the familiar voice? Those answers belong later. For now, the story begins with the final days of the woman who seemed determined to keep working almost until the end. Dolly Parton raised in a one-room cabin where money was scarce and necessities were often stretched as far as they could go. Her father worked as a farmer and construction laborer. Her mother cared for a large family and filled their home with music, stories, and faith. Dolly began writing songs as a child. By her early teens, she was already performing publicly. At 13, she appeared at the Grand Ole Opry, where Johnny Cash introduced her. After graduating high school in 1964, she moved to Nashville with a simple goal: make a life in music. At first, songwriting became her opening. Then came the records, the television appearances, the partnership with Porter Wagoner, and eventually the decision to step beyond the role others had imagined for her. Songs such as Jolene and I Will Always Love You established her as a songwriter whose work could survive beyond any particular performance. I Will Always Love You, written when she was separating professionally from Wagoner, would later become a global phenomenon through Whitney Houston. But Dolly refused to remain inside one category. She moved into Hollywood with films including 9 to 5, The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, Rhinestone, and Steel Magnolias. She continued recording. She wrote. She produced. She built businesses. And alongside all of it was her private marriage to Carl Dean. They married in 1966, when Dolly was only 20 and Carl was 21. Their relationship lasted nearly 6 decades, through fame, constant travel, enormous professional changes, and years when Carl deliberately stayed away from the spotlight. Carl died in March 2025. That loss changed Dolly. In the months that followed, she continued working, but she also acknowledged that grief and exhaustion had affected her health. By 2026, several public appearances had been postponed. She missed events connected to Dollywood and other projects after doctors advised her to limit travel following health problems that included dehydration and dizziness. Then, just 4 days before her death, Dolly spoke publicly about those struggles. In an interview published August 21st, she acknowledged that she had been going through difficult health problems and was still recovering. She also discussed how caring for Carl during his final period had affected her own well-being. But there was nothing about those final public comments that suggested the world was about to lose her. She was still talking about work, still discussing projects, still looking ahead. That makes what happened next even harder to absorb. On the morning of August 25, 2026, news broke that Dolly Parton had died at the age of 80. Her death was announced by her family, including her nephew Brian Seaver, who shared an emotional statement honoring her. The news spread rapidly across Tennessee, Nashville, the country music world, Hollywood, and far beyond. The cause of death was later confirmed by representatives. Dolly had experienced a brief battle with cancer. The specific type of cancer was not disclosed publicly. Her representatives said she died at Vanderbilt Ingram Cancer Center surrounded by loved ones. That distinction matters. There had been public reports of health problems in the days before her death, including hospitalization and other medical concerns. But the confirmed information about the final cause came from her representatives after she died. And then came the reaction. For millions of people, Dolly had never felt like an ordinary celebrity. She had been present for generations. Parents knew her songs. Children knew her books. Movie audiences knew her face. Country fans knew the voice. And people who had never bought a country record could still recognize the name. She had somehow crossed every boundary that usually separates entertainment from everyday life. The woman who had grown up in a tiny Tennessee cabin had become a worldwide figure without ever completely abandoning the identity of the girl who came from that cabin. But there was another side to her story. For decades, Dolly had been working on things that did not always make headlines. She was making decisions about businesses, creative rights, charitable programs, entertainment properties, and projects designed to continue long after a particular album or performance had disappeared from the charts. And that is where the story begins to change. Because Dolly Parton's final chapter was not only about how her life ended, it was also about what she had spent an entire lifetime putting into motion. By the time Dolly Parton reached the later years of her career, the woman the world knew as a country singer had become something much harder to define. She was a songwriter, performer, actress, producer, entrepreneur, author, philanthropist, and one of the most recognizable personalities in American culture. But the remarkable part was not simply how many things she had done. It was how deliberately those pieces connected. Dolly understood that a song could become more than a recording. A story could become a film. A childhood memory could become a book. A business could create jobs. And success could be turned into something that reached people who would never buy a concert ticket. That approach became increasingly visible through the businesses and organizations she built. One of the clearest examples was Dollywood. What began as a theme park partnership in the Smoky Mountains became one of Tennessee's best-known attractions. The park developed into a major entertainment destination in Pigeon Forge, combining rides and shows with Appalachian culture and Dolly's name. Reuters reported that Dollywood attracts roughly 4 million visitors annually, while Dolly retained a 50% stake in the park. That detail says something important about Dolly's business instincts. She did not simply attach her name to a product and walk away. She became involved in projects that could continue operating as businesses, generating employment, tourism, entertainment, and revenue long after a particular concert tour had ended. But perhaps her most personal project was something that had nothing to do with amusement parks. In 1995, Dolly launched the Imagination Library in her home county of Sevier County, Tennessee. The idea was simple: provide young children with a free, carefully selected book every month. The inspiration came from her father, Robert Lee Parton Sr., who had never learned to read or write. What started locally became enormous. Today, the program operates across the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, and Ireland. The organization says it now distributes more than 3 million books every month. That growth is important because it shows how Dolly approached philanthropy. She did not simply make one large donation and move on to the next headline. She created systems. She built organizations that could keep doing the work. And that same thinking appeared throughout her professional life. Dolly's songwriting was at the center of it all. She wrote thousands of songs over the course of her career, including Jolene, Coat of Many Colors, 9 to 5, and I Will Always Love You. Her songs were recorded by other performers, used in films and television, and repeatedly introduced to new generations. That meant her creative work had a life beyond her own performances. Her catalog became a continuing source of value because the songs themselves could keep generating royalties and cultural attention. And Dolly understood that. Unlike many artists who eventually sold major portions of their publishing interests, she maintained control over important parts of her songwriting and music rights. Reuters reported that retaining rights to her music became one of the foundations of the substantial royalty income connected to her career. This was not an accidental outcome. It was part of the way she conducted business. She knew what she had created, and she knew that a song could still be earning money decades after it was written. The same principle applied to entertainment. Dolly became a successful actress without abandoning music. Her role in 9 to 5 made her a major film star, while her songwriting for the movie produced another defining hit. Steel Magnolias showed a different side of her acting ability. Television specials, productions, books, merchandise, and other ventures followed. Her career kept expanding without completely losing its connection to where she started. Then there was the business world surrounding her name. Over the years, Dolly became involved with products ranging from fragrances and cosmetics to food and other consumer ventures. Recent reporting has also highlighted projects connected to coffee, pet products, home goods, and additional Dolly-branded merchandise. But even here, there was a pattern. Dolly rarely seemed interested in becoming everything to everyone. She built around her strongest assets: her name, her songs, her stories, her personality, and her connection with audiences. That restraint helped turn her public image into something commercially powerful without completely separating it from the person underneath. And then there was the part of her life that money could never fully explain. Dolly gave enormous attention to ordinary people. She supported literacy. She contributed to vaccine research. She helped communities affected by disasters. She provided scholarships and educational support. Her philanthropy repeatedly returned to one central idea: give people an opportunity to move forward. The scale of some of those efforts became extraordinary. Her imagination library alone has distributed hundreds of millions of books worldwide, turning a personal tribute to her father into an international literacy program. And yet Dolly continued to describe herself in surprisingly ordinary terms. She talked about family. She talked about work. She talked about faith. She talked about writing songs. She talked about staying busy. Even in the final months of her life, she was still developing projects. That may be one of the most revealing details of all. Dolly did not appear to think of her career as something that had already ended. According to reporting after her death, several major projects were already in motion, including a Broadway musical, the Songteller Hotel in Nashville, a museum devoted to her life, new products, music, books, and other entertainment ventures. Her team has said these projects were planned to continue after her death. That means the story did not simply stop on August 25, 2026. Some of Dolly's work was already designed to keep moving. There were projects waiting to open, songs waiting to be released, stories waiting to be told, businesses waiting to operate, and creative plans that had been prepared with the expectation that Dolly would not always be there to personally oversee them. That changes the meaning of the word estate. Because an estate is not simply a house filled with objects. For someone like Dolly Parton, it can involve decades of intellectual property, contracts, business interests, royalties, creative rights, real estate, memorabilia, unfinished work, charitable commitments, and carefully constructed organizations. And once the person at the center of all those pieces is gone, every part of that structure suddenly becomes easier to see. The public is now beginning to understand just how much Dolly had built behind the scenes. But the numbers being reported about her wealth are not all identical. Some estimates have placed her fortune in the hundreds of millions of dollars, while different publications have produced different figures depending on what they count. Reuters cited a Forbes estimate of approximately $450 million in 2025, while other recent reports have offered higher estimates. When Dolly Parton died, her family was not simply left with paperwork, properties, and financial accounts. They were left with pieces of Dolly. And that is where this story becomes deeply personal. Because after a woman spends 80 years collecting memories, writing songs, building businesses, losing people she loves, and becoming one of the most recognizable faces in the world, an estate is never just an estate. It becomes a record of the life she lived. And for Dolly Parton's family, some of the most emotional things connected to that estate were not necessarily the most expensive. They were the things that still looked like her. The photographs, the costumes, the jewelry, the musical instruments, the personal belongings that had been part of her life long before the world began calling her a legend. Those items became especially significant because documents connected to Carl Dean's estate revealed that he had specifically addressed Dolly's personal effects in his will. His will provided for Dolly to receive his personal effects, including photographs, costumes, jewelry, and musical instruments, with provisions for what would happen to them depending on who survived whom. And then came the part nobody could have emotionally prepared for. Dolly was gone too. The woman who had been named in those documents as the person who would receive those belongings had herself become part of the estate story. Suddenly, objects that had once belonged to a married couple were being considered in the context of two people who were no longer there. That changes how you look at a photograph. A piece of jewelry is no longer just jewelry. A costume is no longer simply something Dolly wore on stage. A musical instrument is no longer merely an old possession. Each one carries a piece of time. And perhaps that is what Dolly's family truly found waiting for them. Not some mythical treasure hidden behind a wall. Not a secret vault filled with millions of dollars. Something much harder to put a price on. Evidence of the life Dolly and Carl actually lived. For more than 50 years, the couple had maintained a private home on 75 acres in Brentwood, Tennessee. They purchased the property in 1972, long before Dolly became the international business empire she would eventually become. Together, with help from family members, they built a 23-room home that became their private refuge. Imagine walking through that house after Dolly was gone. The silence would have been different. The rooms would still be there. The furniture. The photographs. The memories. But the voice that had filled those rooms was gone. And somewhere inside that private world were reminders of the woman the public rarely saw. Not Dolly Parton the superstar. Dolly at home. Dolly the wife. Dolly the daughter. Dolly the sister. Dolly the woman who had spent decades protecting a private life behind an enormous public career. Then there is the part of her estate that is almost impossible to see. Her music. Dolly left behind a catalog of roughly 3,000 songs, including some of the most recognizable compositions in American popular music. Forbes had estimated the value of her song catalog at approximately $120 million in 2025. Think about what that means. Somewhere in the estate are rights connected to songs Dolly wrote when she was young. Songs she wrote during heartbreak. Songs she wrote for movies. Songs she wrote for other singers. Songs that became more valuable decades after she first put them on paper. A song like I Will Always Love You began as Dolly's personal composition. She wrote it. She owned it. And decades later, Whitney Houston's recording transformed the song into a worldwide phenomenon. That means one of the things Dolly left behind was something nobody could physically hold. Her words. Her melodies. Her ownership of the work she created. And those rights can continue producing value long after the songwriter is gone. Then there is Dollywood. Dolly's 50% stake in the theme park represents another enormous part of what she built. The park has grown into one of Tennessee's major tourist attractions, drawing millions of visitors each year. But even Dollywood tells a personal story. Dolly did not simply build a business in some distant place. She built one in the region where she had grown up. The little girl who once lived in a two-room cabin in the Smoky Mountains eventually had her name attached to a destination visited by millions. And that contrast may be one of the most remarkable things her family now has to confront. The distance between where Dolly began and what she ultimately created. Her estimated fortune has been placed at more than $450 million by several outlets, although the exact final value of her estate has not yet been publicly established. Different estimates have produced different numbers, and an estimate should not be confused with a completed probate accounting. So the family did not simply inherit $450 million. They inherited a complicated collection of things that together created that estimated wealth. Music rights, business interests, real estate, intellectual property, personal possessions, future projects, and organizations that Dolly had built to keep working after she was gone. That last part may be the most unexpected of all. Dolly had already been thinking about the future. Her longtime manager Danny Nozel and her team have described a roadmap designed to keep Dolly's creative work moving after her death. That includes projects that were already in development. A Broadway musical, the Songteller Hotel, a museum, new products, books, music, other entertainment projects. Some of those projects may still reach the public even though Dolly will not be here to promote them herself. So in a strange way, her family did not open an estate containing only the past. They found pieces of the future. Work Dolly had started but never got to see completed. Ideas she had already set in motion. Projects carrying her name that may continue appearing for years. And then there is the one thing Dolly may have left behind that matters more than any dollar figure. Her imagination library. She created the program in 1995 in honor of her father, who had never learned to read or write. It began as a local effort and grew into an international literacy program serving children across multiple countries. Millions of books have gone out because Dolly Parton decided that children should have something her father never had. That means part of what her family inherited was not something they could sell. It was responsibility. Responsibility for making sure her organizations continued, for protecting the work, for handling the properties, for managing the music, for preserving the things she had spent decades building. And perhaps that is why the most emotional discovery connected to Dolly Parton's estate is not a secret object at all. It is the realization that Dolly prepared for the day when she would no longer be able to speak for herself. She knew there would eventually be a world without her. And she did not want that world to become a mess for the people she loved. Years before her death, Dolly had already spoken publicly about estate planning and the importance of putting arrangements in place so families would not be left fighting over complicated assets after someone dies. She understood exactly what could happen. She knew that enormous success creates enormous responsibility. And now her family is living through the moment she spent years preparing for. The woman is gone. But her handwriting remains. Her songs remain. Her photographs remain. Her jewelry remains. Her costumes remain. Her businesses remain. Her books continue reaching children. Her music continues playing. And the projects she started are still moving forward. That is what they found after Dolly Parton's death. Not simply wealth. Not simply possessions. A lifetime. A lifetime compressed into houses, photographs, songs, contracts, businesses, memories, unfinished dreams, and objects that suddenly became priceless because the woman who gave the meaning was no longer there. And perhaps the most unexpected thing Dolly left behind was not something she kept for herself at all. She left behind a way for other people to keep receiving something from her. A child opening a book. A fan hearing Jolene for the first time. A visitor walking through Dollywood. A singer recording one of her songs. An audience watching a new production she helped create. And somewhere, years from now, someone may hear Dolly Parton's voice without ever having met her. They may never know what the rooms in her home sounded like. They may never see the jewelry she wore. They may never touch the instruments she played. But they will still receive something she left behind. Her work, her stories, her kindness, and the strange, almost impossible proof that a woman who began with almost nothing spent her entire life creating things that could keep giving after she was gone.